Okay, this may take the full time, so we may have to wait for the questions, or limit the time. And also, I'd like to be able to keep right through, and not do any questions until the end, because there's a lot of material to cover. And those of you who did get either the big Olson or the big Blake, would be good to have it right now. Follow some of the quotes, but for the most part, I have page numbers. I don't for this book because there's no pagination, so you just have to leap through. And this book's out of print anyway, right, John? The archaeologist?
Yeah.
So, but in the selected Olson, you find quite a few of the main poems from this book. He does have copies of that. This book is all of the non-Maximus poems. In other words, all the poems that aren't in here. Thanks, Steve. Okay, now, well, did you all read this little description? Now we've got these nice big ones. These guys. You want these?
Yeah.
Here. Wait a minute, I have to keep a souvenir. So that gives you the proposition of the human as a poetic activity with the 8 units. And I've got a page of opening statement that will make maybe make that a little bit more clear. On the proposition of, now remember tonight we're on this first unit, the search or the hunt. And as of the proposition, the human as a poetic activity, I've got 2 quotes from Novalis, who's a German poet, Blake's contemporary. And the first one is, and this first quote is where I got the language for this statement of the human as I don't know if it's, we will study the poetic activity that creates the faculty of perception. Now that's from this Novalis quote, that simply is activity is the faculty of receiving. He uses the word receiving. So you might want to jot these quotes. Activity is the faculty of receiving. And the second one is, the poet does not make, but makes it possible for one to make. Now, and then in case that we thought from that word activity that it meant normal space-time act, rather than the qualifier poetic activity, I've got a little quote from Oscar Wilde, his essay called "The Critic as Artist," which you should put up against these other ones. When man acts, he is a puppet. When man acts, he is a puppet. So you have, as you'll notice as we go ahead, my procedure is fairly antithetical in the sense that I feel that if you bring 2 thoughts that are seemingly contradictory, that you can perform your meditation upon the material better, because activity is the faculty of receiving sitting by itself, you can mishear the word activity, faculty, and receiving, all three. Now, at least the Wilde quote clears up the first one. That activity is not the same as the kind of activity that the man who acts simply acts. In fact, maybe I should give you that, if I can find it. Yeah, I think I marked it in here. Another Olson quote. Actually, it's from Goethe, but Olson quotes Goethe in a poem, and it might be useful on that act also. Said he, that is Goethe, to dream takes no effort. To think is easy. To act is more difficult. But for a man to act after he has taken thought, this is the most difficult thing of all. So that's kind of in the spirit of it, but this activity isn't simply a thinking activity, isn't a taking thought and acting as though you were to think to, that is in the sense of conceiving an action and then executing it. But this is an ongoing activity of a different order, which is why I'm calling it poetic, and I hope the material glosses that. The next quote is an Olson quote that he kind of got from Creeley in a way, not the language of it, but the idea of it, which is, you may know this one, form is never more than an extension of content. Form is never more than an extension of content. Now the sleeper in that one is content. In other words, what is that content? Where does it come from? How to distinguish that received content in the sense of our initial quote, activity is the faculty of receiving. How does one distinguish the content of that reception from all the usual given content that one might assume from a statement like that, you know, in the sense of the old form-content distinction that's been around in writing for years. That I think the attention gets placed on the form side more than the content. So I'm stressing the content. Where does that? How do you distinguish that content from the normal givens, which would be things like nature, history, dream, other powers, or in fact the big one, life itself. Life itself, you assume, gives you a content. So then to take that very last statement about the specific purpose of the course, then how locate the minute particulars of daily life in a human locus, not of place, but of a discoverable activity. In other words, I'm saying that home is not a place, but an activity. For Blake, the activation of such a context of content was made possible by the existence of a poetic genius, quote, poetic genius. No other form of action is strong enough to intervene upon the background of the givens, these various ones that I've mentioned, nature, life, is strong enough to intervene upon the background of the givens because its motivation and fulfillment assumes them. As Stockhausen said, you no longer form a given material, you also create the material. Okay, that's the intro. Now I want to quickly quickly run through the Olson canon. Specifically on this question of the search. The search being the initial stage of a poetic activity. In a sense, we're always kind of searching for the activity as well as the content, but let's assume that even though one wouldn't be poetically active necessarily in beginning a search, including the poet himself, it's I don't want to get it too complicated logically. It's simply, I'm assuming that we can start with the search as a beginning activity. And his very first poem in this book it's 1946. It was published in Harper's, and it's called Lower Field, Enniscorthy. So here's where he started. The sheep like soldiers, black leggings, black face, lie boulders in the pine's shade at the field's sharp edge, ambush and bivouac. A convocation of crows overhead, the mucks in their own mud and squawk, makes of the sky a sty. A bee is deceived, takes the rot of a stump for honeycomb. Two black snakes cross in a flat spiral, the undisciplined path. Report over all the sun. So right away we've got boulders, the flat spiral, the undisciplined path, and overall the sun as things that the searcher is up against right away. And even the bee is deceived. Now, but the most famous thing on this beginning activity or searching activity is his biggest early poem called The Kingfishers, which is 1949, written coming out of reading Mao's speech that was reprinted in a French publication, so it has French quotes in it for that reason. And it was he called it his political poem because Mao said the light was in the east, and the Olson is saying Kingfisher flies west, so it's his coming up against that revolution. But that's not what we're interested in. I just wanted to tell you that. All I'm interested in here is the very last lines. Well, maybe I'll give a couple more than the last lines, just because it will connect to that sun that we just left. But despite the discrepancy, an ocean, courage, age, this is also true. If I have any taste, it is only because I have interested myself in what was slain in the sun. But these are the lines I want to give you. I pose you your question. Shall you uncover honey where maggots are? I hunt among stones. Now this whole first unit is based on that line. I hunt among stones. And then in the ABCs 2, which is 1953, published in Origin 8, he's continuing on, this time retelling the Argonaut story and talking about Jason, and ends the poem, and the boat, how he swerves it to avoid the yelping rocks where the tidal river rushes. I'm just going to give you the lines that I'm cueing to, and then you can read the whole poem in the selected Olson. The next famous poem would be In Cold Hell in Thicket. which is 1951, Golden Goose, where he says, "Who am I but by a fix and another, a particle, and a congery of particles carefully picked, one by another, as in this thicket, each smallest branch, plant, fern, root," so forth. And the next one is for Sappho, comma, back. This is also 1951. If I can find the line. Yeah, here it is. "In such containment, and in search for that which is the shoot, the thrust of what you are, of what you were so delicately born, of what fruits of your own making you are, the hidden constants of which all the rest is awkward variation." And then the next is concerning exaggeration, 1951 also, which introduces another key word for Olson on the principle of this activity, which when he explained from his own sense of movement in seminar, his idea was that nature is like in any dextro, it turns right. It's a right turning, whereas the human is a leftward turning activity. So the lever goes against the natural turn, in the sense that we grow in a kind of screw. And a big word for him then is twist. He's got a poem called "The Twist," and this one simply is, or the lines simply are, "And I twist in the early morning, asking, where does it stop?" Well, I could read a couple more lines there because it's pertinent to that twist. "All is of the matter. Dignity is not to be confused with realism, is not found," he was canny enough to say, "in the straight on." Blake says that too. It's the as of the poetic genius, that it's the straight roads are like for improvement, but it's the crooked roads that are the paths of genius. You don't hear genius there as Einstein or something. I mean, genius is like that, etymologically genius, like that you have everyone has a genius. Not found in the straight on, however much it does lie in particulars, as distorted as an instant is content. And its form, question mark, how shall you find it? If you are not, in like degree, allowable, are not, as it is, at least, in preparation for an equal act. Okay, the next one is the motion. It's kind of short, I could probably do it all. The motion, not verbal, the newt, less active than I, the fire pink, not me, the words, not me, not my nature, I, not even honor, anything, but that my freshness not be open as my male must not be before I do. No doctrine, this is a good one right here, no doctrine, even that the flower flames, if I don't. No capture, if the captive, even the instant, is not I. Thus thou. He's got it, I don't want to dump all my page markers, but he's got it laid out like in a spatial page. So tries to convey some of that motion of a search among the particulars of a place. Because he's very, very spaceman. Space his as you'll see when you do the Maximus, it's very geographical. Okay, I guess we're ready for that. And that's all of the earlings that are on that point of the search. Okay, then the Maximus picks up. Very first poem, I, Maximus of Gloucester, to you. He begins right away. 1. The thing you're after may lie around the bend of the nest. 2nd. Now, I think most likely in the original, or in the first writing, that was next. In other words, of the next, 2nd. But in the term of the poem, which is going to be a bird poem, it becomes nest. The thing you're after may lie around the bend of the nest, which kind of really makes it better. It's an improvement because now you know that it is a poetic activity, and it does mean that you have to be, it isn't a matter of simply bending around the next second without anything else to do. Then you'd be more like a Taoist or something, or in Zen maybe. I mean, it wouldn't be that kind of activity. You have to have the fact that you are making a nest. And then you're at the crux of it, I think, because we do. For example, Olson liked it that the plumbing would break, and he's got poems about that because it means the house isn't to real estate. I mean, it's a continual problem. I mean, you don't have to worry; it is anyway. But that the fact of it, it's not a place, but an activity. Unless it opens you up before you do. See, that was that other poem, right? Like it opens your mail before you can get it. Because you think it's a bill, you see, because it's all on this other track. Okay, then, and there's a lot of stuff in here. You should read this one. The nest comes back. In fact, I think next does come in. Yeah, right here at the end. And he's speaking directly to us. The nest, I say to you, I, Maximus, say, under the hand as I see it over the waters, from this place where I am, where I hear and still hear, from where I carry you a feather, as though sharp I picked up in the afternoon, delivered you a jewel, it flashing more than a wing, than any old romantic thing, than memory, than place, than anything other, than that which you carry, than that which is, call it a nest, around the head of, call it the next second, than that which you do, than that which you can do, not do, can do. Okay, a note on the above. Now I'm going to skip a whole bunch of pages. Practically the whole book. That's the one to study though initially. Yeah, the second one is all the way into the second volume of the Maximus, called Maximus 4, 5, 6. This part is 1 through 3, and then 4, 5, 6 follows. It's page. That was page 5. Now I'm on one page. Let me see, 179. Yeah, this is 178, called A Note on the Above. A Maximus psalm, the siren sang. He stopped his ears with caulking compound. He listened, he traveled, he went, he passed, he went in and out of wood. The bugs sang grand. Birds led him on a paradise alley. Some country roads have trees growing, and the road turns in such a way it is special for a few feet. I didn't read it right, but all I want is those last lines anyway. And the road turns in such a way it is special for a few feet. Doesn't matter because he's got that on the tape. You can hear him read it. I creeled it up for some reason. I don't know why. Okay. At the boundary of the mighty world, this is the Gravelly Hill poem. This second volume is the fact of his being Maximus is turning his back on the sea and facing the other way, facing toward the nation. And specifically going inland from the coast of Gloucester to this place called Dogtown, which is really an abandoned town which is overgrown to thicket with berry bushes and stuff, and lots of boulders. And he's up there on Gravel Hill. He says, overlooking the town, sitting there like the Memphite lord of all creation, with my back, with Dogtown over the crown of Gravelly Hill. It is not bad to be pissed off, where there is any condition imposed. But what did I want to quote from that? No, I guess just the beginning. Gravelly Hill was the source and end, or boundary, of Dogtown, on the way that leads from the town to Smallman's, now dwelling house, the lower road Gravelly. How the hill was, not the modern usableness of anything, but leaving it as an adverb, as though the earth herself was active. She had her own characteristics. She could stick her head up out of the earth at a spot and say to Athena, I'm stuck here. All I can show is my head, but please do something about this person I am putting up out of the ground into your hands. And then it goes on from there. Now, right around this time, there's a poem called The Ridge that isn't in the book. But I've got it, and it's, John's got it, it's this white one, number 6. The Ridge, it's 1968. And it was called a companion to letter 27, which should be in this vicinity. That's that, I don't know if you know, that's that famous, when I come back to the geography of it, which was withheld from the first Maximus, so it's in the second one. But I'll just give you a little piece from The Ridge. Yeah. It's this kind of gets at it also on the activity. It's this business of bending around something, going all about it, not even guessing you know the other side of it because you have the perfectness of the curves figured without damn well passing around it, totally, encompassing it, girdling it by your own passage. Better to take the time to walk the whole ground. Or, I'll finish that. Or to expect that there'll be a bump on the orange, a nipple on the sphere, just where it should be. No such thing, that a protuberance, or that it will come out stuck like gum to the fingers. You blew such a bubble, it burst on your nose. but you could maybe since you don't have this book, that's letter 28, the ridge. It's this business of bending around something, going all about it. And then an instance of that is the poem called West Gloucester, which would be keep going. Now well, I'm not sure if he's that west of, he may not be west of Dogtown. He may mean the other way, toward Beverly, which wouldn't be that west. Wouldn't be. It's called West Gloucester.
John, do you know where Charles developed that methodology?
Oh, which?
Walking all around it.
No. Well, he said he came from the last walking period of man. That, we weren't much walkers anymore.
Yeah.
But he also, you could say it this way too, that since he's talking about the question in the Tyrian businesses is how to dance sitting down, right? So it's the same deal. You say how to walk sitting down. This is a poetic activity. Right? It doesn't mean walking to Lockport.
Because Jung,
how did Jung get it?
Jung has a similar methodology in that his approach, so to speak, to the unknown was to move all around it for a certain ambulance.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's that leftward turning. If we're talking the stone, that'd be the old method of a singular, like the Kaaba, the leftward turning around the black stone, which is not quite ragged enough, crooked, screwed up enough. It's too religious. It's not strictly poetic. I mean, like he says, you don't know what's going to happen around the bend, because it's not strictly in space, because that would be one of those given contexts. If there even is a black stone, whether you place it in nature or in a context of history or wherever. If we're trying to create a content, we can't assume we even have a place to go like that to perform something. That it's I would think more in time. If he's saying the units, you'll notice are time words. The next second, so forth, instant. It's more of a time activity than a space one. I would think that it's also so something that you so don't know that even if you already know you're a poet, it wouldn't help, because time. You have no way of knowing what the fullness of time will bring. So it has its own narrative. So I would think, in Jung's sense, his work with the stones, when he got into the masonry and building the tower, would be more like that kind of activity. He didn't know about bumbling around with the stones, and then ends up having built. But he didn't know when he started that that's what would happen. And it wasn't even a professional activity. It was some way of getting in touch with something that maybe there was no other way except to be that childlike in the beginning of it. And I think Olson felt it was he's very much like a kid that way. He didn't lose that. In fact, one of the neighbor kids, little kid, did something to him, and he took them up and put them on top of his car and bit him. And his mother came out screaming, "You bit my child." He's a 50-year-old man biting a little kid. He didn't lose that sense of, hey, no talk about it, just go right, But now on this movement, one of his main images for it was the star-nosed mole. And this West Gloucester poem is a little story about. He knew about this mole before, but he saw this one in trouble, and that's what the thing is about. The Condylura cristata on Atlantic Street West, Gloucester, spinning on its star wheel nose in the middle of the tarvia. I don't know what tarvia is. We'll have to find. George's book will gloss stuff like that. Does anyone know? Probably because it had been knocked in the head, was actually fighting all the time with its forepaws at the lovely mushroom growth of its nose, snowball flake pink flesh of a gentian, until I took an oar out of the back seat of the station wagon and removed it like a pea on a knife to the side of the road. Stopped its dizzy dance on its own nose out of its head, working as though it would get rid of its own pink appendage, like a flower dizzy with its own self, like the prettiest thing in the world drilling itself into the pavement. And it turns out he thinks that what was wrong was that the highway had magnetized the thing. So he puts him over into the grass. That's the star-nosed mole. Okay, Maximus to himself. Page 420. Yeah, now we're in volume 3. Let's see, where are we at that point? I think we switch it. Yeah, we were in volume 3 there. They put the title or the cover pages in so you can tell where the next thing starts. But the mole poem is in volume 3, and Maximus to himself, June 1964. No more where the tidal river rushes, no more the golden cloak. Now this is going to return to the Argonaut story, the fleece. No more the golden cloak, beloved world. What is that? No more where the tidal river rushes, no more the golden cloak, beloved world, no more dogs to tear anything apart, the fabric, nothing like the boat, no more vessel in the Virgin's arms, no more dog rocks for the tide to rush over, not any time again for wonder, the ownership solely mine. And that thing about the vessel, the lady of good voyage in the church has a schooner in one of her arms. The one on top of the church has the Christ child, but the one inside has a boat, which is the one that Olson is calling attention to. And that's that's the Our Lady of these poems, is that literal Our Lady of good voyage. I guess Portuguese church. And another implication of that ownership solely mine would be that he has moved out of the old narratives, like the Argonaut story for the organization of material. That is, once this material that you're using is you created yourself, the ownership is solely your own. That's one sense of it. There are other senses of this poem. But you remember the dogs were because in the like the Actaeon stories coming in here also, he had seen Artemis at her bath and the, it turned into one of his tags, and the dogs go after it. There's a lot of dog poems in here. No more dog rocks. And remember, those were those same ones at the beginning that Jason was trying to at least negotiate to avoid in the ship. But Olson has long turned his back on the sea, and he's out of that narrative completely. He's trying to get into the narrative that we live in. And so, yeah, this isn't an option. Yeah, right. This has already all happened. And the poet is simply trying to get a text up to it. So it isn't as though you have to drop what you're doing in order to do it. It's already what's happening. It's just that our recognition system, what we tell ourselves is happening, is caught in a whole bunch of prior narratives that been around. And can't really, as everybody knows, can't really account for what's happening. Although I suppose the Falwell and those guys try it all the time. And it's getting worse. The third morning is beautiful. A third morning, it's beautiful. Okay, 494 this is. This is a great poem on Shag Rock and the cormorant. I'll just give you the piece of this. Yeah, he says, this is late too, this is 1966. He's only got 3 more years. Well, actually from the February date, he's got 4 more years. And he says, and was in this last month and this winter seeking another step or objecting in my soul and to my soul at fate. I was indeed planning to walk round the higher world, to go as my cormorant flies, if such a short distance, when those words of the soul, how could the heaven of the soul itself say, quote, that is no way for thee? How could I be left as the cormorant with no more flight than our own rock, which leaves only in effect and only, it bracketed, if the instance here reported for days, once a year takes off, and not even from the land, seems only as the cormorant itself laboriously gains flight just at water level and lands almost as soon as in flight on the spindle. Where have we gone? It's a long sentence, right? Where have we gone? Where have we gone? And what is the prison the soul says you shall stay in? It is none, my island has taught me. Okay, the art called Gathonic. 553. And just a piece of this also. We trace wood or path, will not hasten our stepwise advance. We don't rush off backwards to other places or colonialize either what hasn't even yet borne its human actions, its measure. And then at the end, he has, on these two like seawater ways also have corners. Well, this like seawater ways because this movement is on the land, and one could even think of it as a movement of mind in time. Also, these two, like seawater waves, also have corners. So in other words, again, the turning isn't an arbitrary, it's not an option. We're talking the actual, what the demand in fact is. So it isn't like a spiritual discipline, but a very practical necessity. Okay, 556 is poem that opens, "To get the rituals straight." Okay, this may take the full time. So I don't we may have to wait for the questions or limit the time. And also I'd like to be able to keep going right through and not do any questions until the end. Because there's a lot of material to cover. And those of you who did get either the big Olson or the big Blake, would be good to have it right now. Follow some of the quotes, but for the most part I have page numbers. I don't for this book because there's no pagination. So you just have to leap through. And this book's out of print anyway, right, John? The archaeologist?
Yeah.
So, but in the selected Olson, you find quite a few of the main poems from this book. He does have copies of that. This book is all of the non-Maximus poems. In other words, all the poems that aren't in here. Thanks, Steve. Okay, now, well, did you all read this little description? Now we've got these nice big ones. These guys. You want these?
Yeah.
Here. Wait a minute, I have to keep a souvenir. So that gives you the proposition of the human as a poetic activity with the 8 units. And I've got a page of opening statement that will make maybe make that a little bit more clear. On the proposition of now remember tonight we're on this first unit, the search or the hunt. And as of the proposition, the human as a poetic activity, I've got 2 quotes from Novalis, who's a German poet, Blake's contemporary. And the first one is, and this first quote is where I got the language for this statement of the human as I don't know if it's, we will study the poetic activity that creates the faculty of perception. Now that's from this Novalis quote, that simply is activity is the faculty of receiving. He uses the word receiving. So you might want to jot these quotes. Activity is the faculty of receiving. And the second one is, the poet does not make, but makes it possible for one to make. Now, and then in case that we thought from that word activity that it meant normal space-time act, rather than the qualifier poetic activity, I've got a little quote from Oscar Wilde, his essay called "The Critic as Artist," which you should put up against these other ones. When man acts, he is a puppet. When man acts, he is a puppet. So you have, as you'll notice as we go ahead, my procedure is fairly antithetical in the sense that I feel that if you bring two thoughts that are seemingly contradictory, that you can perform your meditation upon the material better, because activity is the faculty of receiving sitting by itself. You can mishear the word activity